Always hung out with the girls. Always hung out with the girls. Always hung out with the girls. The girls, they accepted me.
Hi, and welcome to the Fluid Voice. I am Ozma In The Dark, with some sort of space background, a gray shirt, brown hair, blue eyes, and white pale skin, and utilizing she/they pronouns for, I don't know, some purpose. I haven't figured it out yet. I'm figuring my life out. And I'm here with Christy. How are you doing?
Hi. I'm doing fine. Christy, I utilize she, her pronouns for the purposes, because I bought them in a microtransaction and I feel like I should use them. If my picture is showing the way it should be, I'm a redhead, very pale, playing a purple guitar.
And we are here with Perfict as usual. Perfect.
Hello.
It's worried we lost you for a second.
Okay. Using he, him pronouns for boring reasons. People like them, they expect them.
Okay, and tonight we are here with our wonderful guest, That Dang Dad.
Hi, my name is That Dang Dad. I go by Phil, AFK. I'm currently imbued with he, him pronouns. Not for any particular reason, just how God made me. I am in my room with some nice bisexual lighting, kind of blue and purple. And I am a white guy with a beard and pale skin. So it's pale skin club, I guess, tonight. And but a winning smile, like just a dazzling smile. So you can picture that.
Okay, and before we bring up the topic, today is still Trans Day of Remembrance. I forgot what day it was until like or forgot what day. I forget Trans Day of Remembrance sometimes, and honestly I wouldn't be able to deal with it in any major sense for a topic episode, given that I've lost 2 friends this year and I am not in it. I realized after watching Wakanda Forever that I am not in a good state for dealing with grief and loss at the moment. But yeah, so today's topic is empathy, and I guess so. This is the long story, the long and short of why I actually wanted to get you on the show, Phil, after the video I did about how Outlast accidentally made me a better person. It wasn't intentional by Outlast, because there's a lot of disableist type attitude, but like yeah, I used a clip from you. I probably should have asked. I don't always remember, because you did a good breakdown on like how people can prevent empathy. Like it was the two sides of things. It was the video you did about police related stuff. And it was just a better breakdown than I could have done. But like on the comments of that video, someone brought up radical empathy, and I was like, yeah, you know what, like empathy in general, I don't think, I think is like love is oftentimes assumed with things, and people don't think about it, and there's just an assumed place that everyone's at, and I don't know.
Yeah. So, was the video that you were talking about where I was talking about learning to dehumanize people?
Yes.
As a cop? Okay.
Yeah, because I think in the video I was framing it in the sense of like, because Outlast is in Asylum, and it accidentally humanized, for me personally, it because of various other thought processes, and it's not like, and they didn't mean to humanize the patients, but accidentally did for me, and so that game added a lot of impact, and it was just because they had a character that you're supposed to be supposed to like pity or something, but like instead I empathized with the character, and then I was like, I can't be afraid of like any of these patients. They've just been through shit. There's a bunch of people that have been through shit. I'm like, it's really relatable, and it's very much not the case, because necessarily, at least the reasoning I had in that video was because I saw a video that upset me because it was essentially saying that there's a certain type of people that it's okay to dehumanize, was essentially what it was saying. It wasn't necessarily what they're trying to say, but it was essentially saying that like the crazy person, it was about like how to properly write madness, and the reasoning is madness works well in terms of writing if it's not someone you would meet in normally in life, and you don't feel any empathy for them. And I'm like, that's so many levels of cringe.
That's a pretty spicy meatball. It's something that I think about a lot. So when that video that you're referencing was kind of, that was one that Thought Slime shared with his audience, and it kind of brought a lot of new people to me and brought a lot of new viewers and stuff like that. And it brought me into a lot of circles and communities that were, we'll say, hard left, the ACAB stuff, and the, like real deal communists, real deal anarchists. And it's great. And I loved getting to know a lot of these people and learning from them. But it was kind of interesting because there was this video I had about like, I was taught to dehumanize Hispanic people. I was taught to dehumanize disabled people. Here's how my time in law enforcement taught me to stop thinking of these people as people. And sometimes in the comments, I would get comments back about dehumanizing cops. And not to say like, oh, both sides or anything like that, but like, it really made me think like, oh, okay, here's an impulse that I know better than to follow without thinking it through. Like, can you dehumanize every cop? Can you dehumanize every soldier? Can you dehumanize every this or that? We know it's wrong to do that when it's a certain, a race or a religion or an ability status or something like that. Different, is it different when it's a profession, something someone's chosen to do, something somebody does knowingly? Does that change the equation at all? And so that was something that really got me thinking about, like, is there anybody that you ever shouldn't humanize? And not saying that I've come to any great big grand conclusion, but it was definitely something that made me think like, wow, I've never really thought about it that way before.
Christy and Perfict, you can always pipe up too with conversation. Sorry, I'm just worried about it because I'm like, I immediately have something to say, and I'm like, I I want you guys to have the ability to say stuff too. Maybe I'm just over worrying.
Gosh. No, again, I don't understand. You get into some things that I just don't understand, that my brain doesn't process properly. And non-empathy is one of those things. I separate actors from systems, and it's there's
Okay.
It's the same. It's probably the same place in my head that doesn't process borders. So I don't have a heck of a lot to say. I'm more interested in how other people think about it.
Well, I mean, so I think about it in terms of to some degree the actions being done, because like there's the emotion behind the actions, and then there are the actions themselves. Like you can have someone who's understandable, and it's understandable why they're doing bad stuff, but that doesn't change the fact that they're doing bad stuff. I don't think empathy and fighting against problems are necessarily in opposition at all.
That's what I'm saying. Systems and people are different things. People operate within systems, and systems can be bad or good.
And sometimes that happens, and sometimes people are more inclined to be jerks for whatever reason, and maybe that's a bit harder to figure out and empathize with, because it's hard because you don't want, like, ideally I don't want to make a caricature of someone, because that's not really understanding the situation. You can sort of empathize with like a parody of a character or whatnot, and you're not actually thinking about their thought processes. But like, I get the impression that some people have a different philosophy to stuff and value power and status more than I do, because like everyone's got different people have different philosophies, although there's a lot of overlap because most people feel bad if someone they empathize with is hurt, and most people feel good when they help someone that they would empathize with or whatnot.
For me, oh, go ahead.
That's kind of definitional. If you empathize, then, I mean, that's kind of definitional. If you empathize, then when that person is hurt, you feel hurt. I mean, even in the physical sense. I mean, you see them physically hurt, and your mirror neurons fire. So you are experiencing a internal image of pain.
Yeah, I think
so. I think that's the basic of empathy. Sorry.
Oh, I was to say one of the things for me that was interesting, thinking through how I had been taught to dehumanize people, and and in the context of this discussion, not empathize with them or almost anti-empathize with them, was not only would it not only what it said about how I sort of passively felt about them or what, my reaction to them, but also for me, empathy was largely about what I was willing to do for, or more likely to them, what I would allow myself to do to somebody, and so, I think in that video, I told the story about my training officer that, towed a single mom's car that was full of her groceries with her 3 kids. And I was like, sir, she's right around the corner. We don't need to do this. Let's just follow her home or something. And he said, he said, well, she's just another one of them. To hell with her, basically. Like, I don't care that
we are past the 16-minute mark. So
okay,
you are.
Yeah, he said she's just she's one of them. Fuck her, is what he said. And basically, like, because he had so thoroughly dehumanized the citizens in his mind, it allowed him to enact these cruel acts to people, without a second thought, or maybe more importantly to this discussion, it allowed him to put something higher than their dignity and their well-being. It allowed him to perform cruelty in service of something higher in a way that he would not have done to people that he emphasized and humanized more. And I just think that's what's interesting to me is, like, what does empathy stop you from doing to people? And when you don't have it, what does it let you do to people? It's kind of scary to see, at least for me, it was scary to see what I'm capable of. That's why this is a topic that's kind of near and dear to me,
I forgot that Context Wrench, I'm pretty sure, showed me that that disability access video that you did, and then I forgot that I'd seen it, and then I'd found out about you with the other video. But yeah, no, it is interesting, or it is. I think it's easy, because I get the impression that most people are afraid of that too, but they don't realize that it's anyone can do cruel things. You don't need to have like some special you don't have to be that atypical to do cruel things. I mean, a lot of Germans did cruel things in World War II, but they weren't that different from the average person. I mean, there are some people who are more devoted to that stuff, but there's a lot of conditioning to, well, like you said, but except it would have been for the Germans, it would have been, they're just Romani, fuck them. They're just disabled, fuck them. They're just Jews, fuck them.
Oh, okay. That is a big part of it. There was the atrocities during the the Young Turks and the rebellion in Turkey, and the atrocities that were committed there were a big study of the Third Reich, because they wanted to find out how to get people to commit those kinds of atrocities. And it was by incremental little steps and getting a first steps involved. And that takes us to, we take police officers and we tell them that they can lie to people, that they can lie to the populace. They are not supposed to lie to other officers, but they can lie to the populace. They've been taught their whole life, since they were pissing their pants, that they cannot lie to people, that lying to people is wrong. And then they're told that they can lie to the populace, but not to police. And that creates cognitive dissonance, two beliefs that are not compatible. And you have to make a resolution that makes an adjustment to something, so that you can have these two beliefs without causing this dissonance. And the normal adjustment is, the populace aren't really people. And that is the adjustment that they were that the Third Reich was looking for, just that sort of thing. This is something we do to our police officers in their training, which is kind of reprehensible.
Yeah, and I think for me, my experience of it was there was this mythical citizenry that we would talk about amongst each other, because everybody thinks they're the hero of their own story. And so you wouldn't hear officers thinking of themselves as cruel, like they wouldn't talk about themselves that way. But we would talk about this mythical citizenry that we would call them just normal people, the normal people trying to live their normal lives. And that's who we're out there to protect. And that's why we've got to be hard on, the bad ones. Only it was every single person that we came across was one of the bad ones. And so we were mean to everybody to protect the good ones who we never met. And you would literally hear, and it sounds silly to say it when I phrase it that way, but you would literally hear officers say well, yeah, I don't ever run into the good people because they don't cause problems. I only run into the bad people. But you see, with that mentality, it lets you do anything to anyone that you ever run into because they're one of the bad ones.
Oh dear.
The fact I'm running into you means you're bad. Yeah.
Yeah. That was one of the hardest things for me to learn. It's to my shame and regret that I didn't learn it faster and sooner, because I distinctly remember being on training and we arrested somebody for a bench warrant. Didn't pay a fine for something. It turned into a warrant and turned into a $40,000 warrant, which means that we had to arrest him and take him to court. Basically, we couldn't just give him a ticket in the field. And he was just, to use that language again, he was just a normal dude. And I remember trying to fingerprint him in the station, and we couldn't get his fingerprints because his hands were so torn up. And I kind of just jokingly said, "Oh man, your hands, you're really giving us a hard time with these fingerprints." And he said, "Oh yeah, I'm a roofer." And I said, "Oh wow, that's tough work." And he said, "Oh yeah, it's really hard." And I said, "How long have you been doing that?" And he goes, since I've been about 13. And he was in his late 40s. And I was like, "You've been a roofer since you were a teen?" And he was like, "I've been working my entire adult life, and I know I'll be working till the day I die," because he was living in poverty, basically. And I just remember thinking that's really just stuck in my head, that this guy was just prepared to die up on a roof, tarring up a roof or something like that. Backbreaking, grueling labor out in the hot sun in California. And he would just sort of accepted, well, this is my lot in life. I'm going to work till I die. And I think about that guy all the time. Just this was a guy that was a human being trying to feed his family, trying to put food on the table, trying to just live his quote unquote normal life. And we're wasting his time with this dumb bullshit, paperwork crimes, and I just, to some extent, almost everybody's a normal person except for, billionaires.
I mean, the concept of normal itself is kind of BS anyways, because what really counts as normal? If anything, we're all abnormal, arguably. I know that has negative connotations generally. It's just
Well, I'm Abby normal. Just same.
But yeah, no, I don't think most people can conceptualize the idea of growing up with a family where I don't think most people can conceptualize nowadays the idea of not being in a position where your life is at any risk unless you put yourself in a dangerous situation. And it's most people's lives are to some degree either a paycheck or a couple months of no paychecks from significantly worse situations.
One of the things I quote all the time is I I'm pretty sure it was a tweet. I wish I remember whose tweet it was, but they said, I remember seeing a tweet one time that said, to all you people who, idolize billionaires and think you're going to be the next Bill Gates or whatever, you're 6 bad months away from homelessness. You are not 6 good months away from being a billionaire. I just remember thinking about that, like, yeah, I'm not even 6 bad months away from homelessness. I'm 3 at the most.
Yeah.
I'm only not at current risk because my parents are middle class. That could change. And, like, basically, if anything happens to them, that could make it a lot more difficult than me. Although I am working through every system I can to get any help I can to make sure I am in a survivable position without it being surviving on, for lack of a better term, the whims of another person.
I am one person's alcoholic slip away from being homeless.
Yeah.
Whether it be mine or another person who has the power of life and death over me.
So in the context of this discussion, I had a question back for the panel. When we're talking radical empathy, what do you mean by radical, or why are we talking? What is escalating it to radicalism in your minds?
Well, I honestly am just repeating a term I heard someone mention, and apparently it's a concept of forcing, of like consciously trying to empathize with people instead of sympathize. That's generally the short and fast. I originally intended to look more into radical empathy, but it's not something I looked into. But it's not. Yeah, it is weird to conceptualize it as radical in some ways.
My understanding is very similar. Yes, I would be saying that it's like active listening. That it's you are actively trying to empathize with a person as a conscious decision of something you're going to be doing and making a practice.
I think one of the main ways of going about it, or at least, again, this is my brain state, the way I am, but to always put things in terms of behaviors rather than identity. So, in other words, someone did a theft, they're not a thief. That's not the way I look at things.
Well, I would say identity is important, but more so in terms of listening to people, just making sure you can, like, trying to understand and imagine if you were in a similar situation. I mean, that is essentially what you're taught about empathy to some degree, but, like, it's not... People are not taught to practice it. It's just assumed to be instinctive, and that's not the case necessarily. And especially if you're taught various reasons why it's not the case. I mean, media essentially categorizes certain people as risks, which disincentivizes empathizing with them, because that implies that you too can become a risk.
Yeah, when
Well, it's hard because I don't even it takes me sometimes having to say I am autistic rather than I have a brain state of autism. But when we get into things like this, it's also one of those I can't exactly deny it because I don't understand some of the things that are being said. I can't conceptualize not being empathetic. I can conceptualize some people who act non-empathetic. But I don't think
empathy is an emotion. You see, it gets classified with the emotions, and emotions are things that happen to us. Thoughts are something we do, but emotions are something that just happen to us.
Well, except for the thoughts that are.
But that's not how it really
control.
works. But that's. I'm just saying that's how we're taught to conceptualize the world. That it doesn't really work that way. You do have control over your emotions, and you can decide to do things and things like that. You do have some sway over them, just like you do over thoughts, and thoughts you don't have as much control over as you think you do.
Yes. Anyways, that's thing to add to your.
Oh yeah. It was interesting because when I heard this topic brought up, or when you sent me the DM about it, and so we're going to talk about radical empathy. I was thinking about it in a almost in a sense of like empathy as a radical act. Radicalism as something. If we're defining radicalism as like opposed to the status quo, or opposed to the dominant system, or opposed to the dominant hierarchy, however you want to define radical. Something violating norms or whatever. I was thinking about empathy as a radical act, and that's something that I've to bring it back around to what we're talking about right now. It's something where I've had to practice that, where I hear about a group or a person or something happening. And it's a practice for me to say, okay, let me think from their perspective for a minute. Let's take me out of my mind and put me in their mind for a minute. Because I grew up very conservative. I grew up in a conservative, kind of fundamentalist Christian church, and very politically conservative and stuff like that. And so, one of the examples that I have growing up is that I had very little empathy for the Palestinian people, because the American evangelical church, the American conservative church, is very rah Israel, and Israel's, the greatest place in the Middle East, and they're the thin blue line between order and chaos over there. And all the Palestinians they're all just terrorists, they're all just trying to kill, and so one of the things I had to learn was to go, okay, hold on a second, because what happened? Why would somebody in Palestine throw a rock at a member of the IDF? Why would somebody do that? Like, oh, I guess I would do that if I was if I was a people who's being occupied by an outside force, taking my home, burning down my olive trees that have been there for 500 years, I'd probably throw some rocks too, And so when I think of radical empathy, I think of empathy that causes us to shoot across like us versus them boundaries that we put between each other. Like, I think so much of capitalism is trying to get people to fight with each other instead of fight with the real problem, and so for me, empathy as a radical act is like, hey, I don't want to fight with you because we all have the same needs. We're all being fucked over in the same way by the same people. We all are we all have the same vulnerabilities. let me see things from your perspective, and like, hold on a sec, let's go after the real people, let's go after the real villains, the people that are keeping us in poverty, the people that are hoarding, the people that are setting us against each other. So for me, it's, to kind of tie it all together, that's kind of how I was thinking of it.
Yeah, so I think, because this is one of those things where it's I mean, it's probably not like actually new as a term, but from the not enough research, because I got far too focused on life stuff and panicking about certain things. I didn't do the research I originally intended to do here, but there's a book by Terry Givens about which about radical empathy as basically a way to try to break white supremacy. I mean, because like moving beyond an understanding of others' lives and pain to understand the origin of our biases, including internalized oppression. That's the to some degree the reasoning, and I think in general inclusivity helps, because I don't think we're going to make a change without it, and empathy is kind of vital for that, because otherwise there starts to build like a hierarchy of these people's things matter, these people not so much because they're those people or whatnot. They have less contribution to society, therefore they're less important type thing, or whatever other ways in which people categorize worthiness of others.
Yeah, that was one of the big things that kind of radicalized me leftward out of being just kind of a, centrist squish, type is, there's a Philosophy Tube video where she quoted Stacy Clifford Simplican, her book, The Capacity Contract. And one of the things that Simplican talks about in this book is the idea of communities of vulnerability versus communities of strength, and how most of kind of capitalist society is revolves around communities of strength, meaning you get to be part of my community if you can do something for us. If you bring something to the table, you can be part of the community. If you have a strength that aids the group, you are welcome. And she contrasts that with communities of vulnerability, which is where, hey, do you and I need the same thing? Let's band together because we're both hungry. So let's band together and find food together. We're both thirsty. Let's band together and find water. And she kind of contrasts these two different things. And I remember just being really struck by that idea of like, yeah, we all need the same things when we all want, within certain parameters, we all kind of want the same things. We all want to not go to bed hungry every night, right? Like we all want to have our physical needs met for nutrition. We want to have our comfort needs met in our home. We want our relationship needs met, whatever that looks like for you, all the different ways that can be. We need our mental health needs met. We need our medical needs met. And so when you look at society from that sense, it's like, oh, I start to see where you and I have more in common than we don't have in common, right? Like there's more that binds us together than brings us apart. And it's a fallacy that like, oh, well, for you to have what you need, I can't have what I need, or vice versa. Like, no. We pretty much mostly need the same things. And if we don't yet, we will eventually, because, disability is the one identity class that everybody will join if they live long enough, right? It's like, it's not just like, oh, well, your needs are a bonus and a nice to have, whereas my needs are foundational to a liberated society. Like, no, it's all connected,
Yeah, and obviously accessibility helps everyone, and it's kind of a major problem that the ADA is not enforced, and everywhere you look is stairs here, stairs there, stairs there, and it's like
It stairs all the way down.
yeah, it's bad. You have to actually make a lot of effort or have a decent amount of money, which given that most, it's like what it's a small percent. I know I saw it, but I can't remember exactly what it is. I know it's a small percent, the number of disabled people who are working and not or allowed to work, because there's a lot
20,
of
20% or something like that.
yeah, it's something like that. And
Let's
even
double
that,
check the literature here.
capitalism, disability. Yeah, capitalism is not a fan of disability and all those heinous acts and the love of eugenics that capitalism has. Yeah, not a fan of capitalism.
Always keeps coming back to eugenics there, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, it's hard for it not to when you base it off of like trying to you essentially have the upper class, which most people aren't, which like 99% of people aren't, like the actual upper class. And then you have, people who are supposed to be really effective cogs in the machine that can be disposed of, and they want to make sure they can sometimes people try to make sure that they don't want a cog that happens to not work in their machine. Basically, there's a lot of issues, and also white supremacy being like a very it's hard not to notice white supremacist aspects in everything. Like the medical model even has some aspects of how people should be.
Have you read that essay by Mel Baggs about disability? You can find a strain of ableism inside of basically every other form of bigotry, every other and not saying that like
that sounds
is
familiar,
the one true.
But like I don't know if I heard that specifically. Maybe I heard it referenced. I've definitely heard that phrase before, about, because it is like, in essence, more than anything, disabled people do not fit in with society, and instead of changing society, a lot of people want to just go all eugenics on stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty much like, you look at the justifications for colonialism, like, oh, we're the enlightened Europeans, we're going to go civilize the savages. Like, well, calling somebody a savage is saying that they're cognitively less, able than you are, is kind of a strain of ableism. Pointing to queer people and saying that they're not normal, or that they can't reproduce, or they're going to reproduce weird, or whatever. This form of ableism. It's like you can almost, there's this strain of like policing bodies and policing brains and almost every single other aspect of disability, not that, or of bigotry, and not putting it on a hierarchy, but just saying like it's this weird lens you can kind of shift between them,
Yeah, and that even goes with, because like it's a lot of, for you to count in terms of a person, you have to be able to do certain things well, or whatever, viewed as someone capable of doing certain things well. And sometimes there's underestimations, and there's misogyny is annoying.
Bitch.
Surprisingly, the more concerning I like. Well, okay, that's not necessarily not true, but like I don't know, like I'm pretty sure I essentially passed with that death threat I got once. And they weren't a fan of me streaming while being a woman, I believe was the reason for that particular death threat, which was somewhat amusing to me. I'm like, at least they weren't
Congrats.
transphobic. But like, I play the most like toxic video game ever. Not the most toxic. Call of Duty still exists. Anyways, the League of Legends is relatively toxic, but also sometimes you end up with a team member that's like really wholesome, and it's just like, and most people are quiet, and there was a lot of queer players, and that's what I'm happy about. I was happy about just seeing
You have
other
such a
queer
generous
players.
heart, giving that person credit for not being transphobic.
Yeah, but like in that, like someone was like,
I mean, you didn't actually see evidence that they weren't. You just
well, okay, I mean, fair. They weren't transphobic with the death threat, okay? With that particular death threat. They were kicked off of Twitch relatively quickly. Surprisingly quickly. Something about death threats being a major problem. Something about saying they're gonna choke you to death. A streamer is gonna, they want to choke you to death. Is really obviously against Twitch's platform. But yeah, no, I got like so the worst, the jerks in League of Legends. Oftentimes the most annoying ones are the ones who are also bad at the game. Was like they were like, "What are you, all girls or whatever?" As like an insult because we lost the match. Now I did not do bad that match, so I'm just going to assume it was everyone else's problem. No, I wasn't doing like a perfect game, but like some people just want to insult everyone. So that they keep up. So they feel like they can be in X hierarchy place, or to prove that they're not disabled, or to prove that they're not because there's a view of how people should be, and they don't want to be one of those others that they already hate.
Yeah, it's like, well, I'm not the problem. Look at them, you know.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I do call them, because I'm an Arcane fangirl, I do call them the Milos of the League of Legends games. But that's...
now, how would you practice radical empathy here? Empathizing with their position and, you know.
I think there's several factors, because I think there are they don't I depending on the person, it depends on the degree that they feel like there will be actual consequences. Sometimes sometimes when people are frustrated or upset about something, they take it out on other people so that they can so just because of, like, to some degree, if you're in some form of emotional pain, you want to inflict pain on others, but that depends on the type of... Yeah, but there's also, it depends on the type of person, because there's also like because you're essentially someone who they don't know, they don't actually most of them don't feel the need to empathize with you, or some people don't feel the need to empathize with you because they don't necessarily see you as people. They see you as internet players, other internet players. They're
Yes. Well, that's the thing, is that the whole thing when you're dealing with the computer, most of the time you're dealing with electronic things. And when you're playing games on a computer, you're playing against electronic components. And the reason you don't, as you're playing your, wizardy game, the reason you don't murder the old lady is that she might have information for you in your adventure later. And this sort of thing.
But I mean, like, people get
only
involved
consequences are in the game and have nothing to do with them. Okay, as people, and if anybody tells you, starts talking to you about how, but they're such a nice old lady, why would you do that to them? You realize they're not real, right? But then when they're in the same relationship, they're sitting in the same chair, they're dealing with the same screen, they are in the same theater of operation. And it's a different situation, however, because there are real people involved on the other end. That sometimes is a jump that people don't make well.
Yes, some people don't make it well, but I do think a lot of people do actually make that jump sometimes when it comes to storytelling in games. Like, most people don't just want to kill random people, even if they have the capability to. Like, a lot of people avoid that.
Totally grant that, yes.
They only kill who they're supposed to kill, because they have a reason to kill those people. Those people are the bad ones.
I don't know if any of you have played Disco Elysium, but your partner in the game, Kim Kitsuragi, in Disco Elysium, you can essentially be whatever kind of person you want to be. You can be a communist, you can be a fascist, you can be a centrist, you can be, a feminist, a misogynist. I mean, it really gives you a lot of freedom, and the game is very reactive to how you are. And Kim Kitsuragi is such a good person to you throughout the game that you could play a playthrough where you absolutely betray the hell out of him and essentially just take away things from him that make him happy. And I have played that game for 100 hours, and I have never done a Kim Kitsuragi disappointment playthrough because I cannot disappoint Kim. Like, I love him. I know he's not real, but I love him. He's my road dog, and I will never hurt him,
Yeah, and
yes.
Yeah, no, it's easy to get that way in games. I mean, to be fair, there are times. See, sometimes I do. Occasionally do. It depends on the game. It depends on how easy it is to dissociate. If it's a character I know, it's going to be really hard. And even if I might curiously try to go through that playthrough, it's just gonna eat at me. I know that happened in Knights of the Old Republic 2. Choosing the dark side option, and they're just like, you got like friends being like, are you like, you've changed or whatever, are you sure you're okay or whatever. It's just like all this stuff. I'm just like, fuck, no, I'm sorry, I have to choose this option. No.
It's funny though, to what Perfict was saying earlier. There's a podcast I listen to called the Judge John Hodgman podcast. John Hodgman is the if anybody's old enough to remember the "I'm a Mac, I'm a PC" commercial. John Hodgman was the PC guy, and he's funny. He's a voice actor and an actor and a comedian. He's very. And funny.
He's on the Daily Show like a ton.
Yeah.
He's on Star Trek Lower Decks. So.
Oh, is he? Yeah. So anyway, his podcast, Judge John Hodgman, he adjudicates very low stakes disputes between like couples and roommates and friends. Like, is it gauche to order an iced tea to go if you're dining at a restaurant? Just these little things that couples squabble about that don't matter. And I remember one of the ones that I think about all the time is a woman wrote in about her husband. She said, "Hey, I'm looking for a judgment against my husband. He treats our Alexa really badly." he is mean to our Alexa. He insults her. He calls her stupid. And when I bring it up to him, he's like, it's a robot. It doesn't matter. It's not real. But he's doing it. But her thing was, he's doing it in front of my son. And it's like, I don't want our kid to think it's cool to treat things this way. And I remember, and John Hodgman was like, hey, is it a robot that doesn't have feeling? Like, setting aside the human beings that field these requests, like, even if it was just a robot, like, it's not a good habit to get into, to treat things like shit. Like, it's not a good habit to get into, like, to lord over things and treat them like your slaves. Like, that's just a bad vibe to do, even if it's not real. Like, I just remember thinking about that a lot. Like, yeah, I wouldn't want my daughter to see me, calling Siri or calling Alexa names, like, just because, like, why invite that thought pattern into your brain,
Yeah.
Radical empathy, even for robots.
Yeah, well, yeah, and like that's the other thing. Like, the robot enemy stories are just like, not a fan of them. Like, it's you get more of an empathetic approach if you look at what was it? The Matrix, the mini films. One of them was about like the robots gaining sentience and all the cruelty that humans enacted upon the robots.
The Animatrix.
The Animatrix.
Yeah, the Animatrix. Yeah. In one of those, it was very much like you totally got why the robots went and did a revolution against the humans. And even in that film, it's not like, a lot of it is empathizing with AI in the Matrix series. So there's actually a surprising amount of empathy in the at least the original trilogy of the Matrix. And also it's a trans metaphor, so that makes it doubly good inherently.
It's funny how much that comes up. Like, I don't know if this is strictly a class analysis or what, but like, thinking about in the Animatrix how humans mistreated their servant robots, and then to think back to the beginning and middle and even now in the pandemic, where there was this strain of sort of like petty bourgeois American, and even not even just working class American, that was really, really upset that they could not go to an Applebee's and yell at a waiter. And it was like this American dream that you'll always be able to lord it over somebody, right? Like, there'll always be somebody in the servant class. You can always yell at a retail employee. You can always yell at a server. You can always yell at a flight attendant. And it was something that I thought was really sadly exposed during the pandemic, when so many retail options were shut down. And it seemed like so many normal, middle-class Americans got really upset that they couldn't boss people around, and so perhaps it's minimizing or whatever, to apply that over to the Animatrix too. But back to radical empathy, I think about that a lot. Like, gosh, we really, as at least in the United States, I don't know if anybody's broadcasting for anywhere in any other country, but
no, we're all in the United.
Yeah, in the United States, it's such a part of American culture to boss around underlings, to boss around retail employees, to treat them like shit because the customer is always right. And I'm a paying customer. You want me to get your manager? Like, oh, we love that shit. And it's, I think about that a lot. Like, wow, what a terrible impulse in our culture,
Yeah, I always just assumed that was supposed to be the villains. That's what, those people are villains in TV shows and movies.
Yeah.
Like, Context Wrench brings up or mentioned a science ethics question about why most virtual assistants have stereotypically femme names and voices and do quote unquote domestic tasks.
Yeah, there's that. I also I got the person on Star Trek wrong. I know the difference between the two of them. They just dress the same, so my brain went funny.
Well, he should be on Star Trek Lower Decks.
Yes.
I'll advocate for that.
I'm sure he would be if they asked him. It's the other guy who looks like him.
I don't.
Yeah, you know, and back
Wait,
to our
who's the
original.
guy who looks like him? Sorry. Wait, no, I'm not gonna go down the tangent. Okay, go back. What you said.
It was just, you know, and to that question about Alexa, Siri, you know, all these female, you know, femme presenting AIs or whatever. Back to my original experience of thinking about empathy is like, who am I allowed to mistreat? It's really interesting that we feel really entitled to mistreat Alexa and Siri. You know, we feel very entitled to stick around with them. You know, I wonder why.
Well, what I find a little bit odd, and I have thought of that, is there's no option to, you know, no, I'd like to have my AI named Roger. It would seem to me that there should just be a switch I could throw.
Alexa and Alex. Yeah.
Instead, you have to get notes from two doctors and
And even then, well, even then, one of them has to be someone who's been treating you for more that you know for like more than a year or whatever.
yeah.
And the other one has to have a PhD. And sorry, my brain went to the actual notes of that. It's
Yep. Anyway,
it has to not be
There
during a
should just be a
pandemic
switch,
because
however.
there has to be
Wouldn't it
hospital
be so much better
space.
with a switch?
the I mean, I was working a temp job because when I was working, I was a permanent temp because I get bored. And I like doing I like doing varied things. And I was getting along with this person I was working alongside very nicely, and I thought, oh. And we started, making friends, and it was really nice. And then we went to lunch together. And we were never going to be friends after that, because his default was to be absolutely horrid to the person at the lunch counter.
The servants?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't just a matter of not asking please. It was, hey, I'm here. Just slamming it. And I'm like, holy fuck. What?
You can tell a lot about somebody by how they treat servers.
Yeah. I mean, I used to think my mother was bad at it, but relatively not. It's one of those things that I think about more than I should, because it's an isolated thing, but it's one of those things that so threw me about people. That I never made another friend as long as I lived. No, that's not how it works.
Wait, what? I'm hurt, Christy. I'm hurt.
That's not what happened at all. Yeah, so as soon as someone says radical empathy, I go straight to that, and that's yeah.
The strange thing is, it's not. There's several ways someone, like, it's not necessarily all like super hardcore hateful when it comes to a lack of an empathetic response. It's one of those things where because there's also the sort of being treated like a freak show aspect. So that happens a lot in queer and disability communities, where like the outside person will either feel like they're entitled to know how someone can happen to be for like I assume the term going through their head is freak, but it's very much that sort of thing where it's like a weird entitlement that I don't understand, because like everyone has their own stuff to deal with, and I mean you can ask a question if you know the person, but it's not like, don't ask random people questions. It's weird.
There's this one of the big philosophical strains in particularly United States culture that I find myself railing against is the idea of like just world theory, where everybody has what they deserve. Everybody, you get what you deserve in this world. And so when people,
I hate that.
Yeah. So when people are wealthy, they've earned it. When people are poor, that's their fault because of bad choices, up to and including when they're disabled. Well, and so I do think like particularly Americans, particularly ones that aren't disabled or are in some kind of normative dominant category, by virtue of anybody choosing to be out and about in the world, they feel like they're able to comment on it because, well, this must, you've chosen to be here. You must have chosen your circumstance, or this must be because of your behavior or your character or what, like they want to know. And so it's like, once, if you see somebody using a mobility device, it's like, oh, how'd that happen? They want to know, like, were you born this way, or did you get that water skiing? Or it's like this weird American obsession with figuring out whether you deserve it or not, which is such a toxic impulse. But like, I remember being a conservative and just like obsessing over whether people were getting their just desserts, were getting what they deserved, and obsessing over whether people were getting things they didn't deserve. And it's like, well, I'll pity you if you're in a wheelchair, but only if you were born that way. If you got that drunk driving, then you don't deserve my pity anymore. And it's like, what a cascade of toxic impulses that is. But I feel like that's
so many problems there.
It's just such a part of American culture that is so disgusting,
Well, there is a huge impulse to, am I doing the right things? Am I abasing myself at the correct altars so that won't happen to me? So what is it? How did you end up that way? So that I can know that I won't is part of the thing. And that does have some connection with, reality. And that there is a certain amount of, you say, well, if you were, jet skiing, and I go, well, those things are dangerous. I'm not doing that. Maybe there's something preserving in that you are now warned off of a threat. Not that they deserved it, but there is that amount of they deserved it somehow. That somehow whatever has befallen you is your own fault. You're to blame, and that I can avoid it. And I'm being smart. You weren't smart. I'm being smart. See?
Yeah, or if it was from birth, okay, I don't have to worry about that. That's none of my, it's not going to affect me.
Yeah.
I'm safe.
And Context Wrench goes into that a little deeper with mentioning that the visibly disabled scene as a deeper mark of sin too. And I think there was something else about disfigurement as also a sign of sin. That's why it's like every evil person in American cinema practically is either disfigured or disabled, because you can't have someone that you can empathize with be the villain.
like I said, it's indelled into the writing. It's indelled into the storytelling. Everything. It's just part of it. That to the point that you get the foreshadowing of one brother's inevitable betrayal of the other by the fact that it's mentioned early on in the book that he has a deformed arm. That's and that's considered literally the foreshadowing of his being a dick.
That's a terrible foreshadowing.
Twisted body, twisted character.
Yeah. It's that's one of those big problems that really needs to. I mean, that's where the importance of representation comes in, so that people aren't.
Ideally, the point that I want the society to reach is when looking back in history and somebody teaches that was it literally that was considered the foreshadowing, people should chuckle.
Yeah, but like,
that's just ridiculous.
But like, yeah, if you have representation, if you have more disabled characters play heroes and not try to hide their disability, and be like actual main characters and heroes and people who you're supposed to empathize with, I think that does make some difference. But obviously also just making everywhere more accessible would make a big difference, because like the level of accessibility changes how often you see disabled people. I'm like, yeah, I saw people like, you know, just at least one visibly disabled person on the bus, like almost any time I go on the bus for more than like 15 minutes, and that probably was one of several factors that skewed my attitude. My attitude was always weird, or weird in a good way, at least with regards to disability. But yeah,
I grew up. I'm from Southern California, but for about 6 years I lived in Austin, Texas during my kind of middle school, late elementary and middle school years. And my middle school had a program where they had a special needs class, you know, for the kids that had special needs, particularly had some really kind of significant special needs. And they had a program in the school where they tried to put those kids in some of the elective classes with some of the kids that were not in the special needs class, just to kind of socialize. And on the face of it, that was obviously, it's a good thing. I feel like the one problem though is this was in Central Texas, and this, I don't know if this will shock you, Texas, not quite the bastion of sort of humanitarian empathy, particularly in the conservative churches that I grew up in. And so in looking back on it, I think it was really important that I spent time in classes and art classes and in gym and stuff like that with kids that had cognitive disabilities and, and things like that. But at the time, there was no, particularly in Texas, there was no nobody was helping kids contextualize this. And so for a lot of kids that were not in the special needs classes, there was this kind of fear and this kind of distrust and this kind of annoyance because some of the kids that had cognitive disabilities were a little disruptive. And it was, I could see it was done with a good heart, but it was really to go back to empathy, they kind of just threw everyone together and they were like, well, you're all in the same class, figure it out. And I don't know that a lot of kids were taught how to how do you exist in a space where somebody has a cognitive situation that makes them call out at inappropriate times, is it okay? Is it okay to laugh at that? Do you tell them to shut up? Do you just ignore it? Like, how do you be in community with people who have different situations than you? We weren't really taught that, and maybe that's the way. Maybe that's how it should be done. Is that we're all in community and we figure it out together. I don't feel like my school quite got there.
I think. Well, I mean, for one thing, more integration in general. Of schools should be helpful, given that disabled people are oftentimes set in a separate school area. Yeah, for the majority of classes, even if there is like occasional electives that they're allowed to take. And that was the case in my school too, but also I'm weird and I was like, I want to be friends with everyone, so I talked with them and like had like genuine back. Like I said, I'm very atypical for this stuff. So
I went to art school, so everything was different there from everywhere else I've ever been. The only time I ever fit in.
But yeah, I do think there's a lot of things that just need to be. There's a lot of things that are assumed that really need to be taught. Stuff like how to better connect with people. Stuff like what's the term I'm trying to think of? Like there's an actual process of when you think stuff out and process why or what the goals are and why am I like they throw it out a lot without actually understanding what the word means. Like way too many people use it without thinking. I can't think of the term, but it happens a lot when you stop and think about something, because a lot of times people come to reactive conclusions, which because obviously people don't have time to think about everything, but like just people aren't taught to stop and think. They're taught, hey, you should memorize these things and then put them on the answers or use them as answers and not actually
What about the word heuristic?
Yeah. No, I don't think so, unless that's also what I'm talking about. I don't know.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
It's like an algorithm.
No, we're taught heuristics. We think by heuristics. It's not an unknown thing. People say, well, I'm thinking logically. No, you think by heuristics. You have a problem, you plug it into a system that you learned.
Logic should also be taught. But
Yes,
not like how it is where it's all hardcore needing to stick to ancient languages. The concepts can be taught.
Logic is way down the road.
The concepts should still be taught so people can more easily think stuff out and come to what is the best conclusion for them and possibly other people as well. Like empathy and logic are both helpful for stuff because...
Well, you can also logic yourself into a bad answer.
I mean, that's true.
It's quite easy. It's a garbage in, garbage out thing. That's why heuristic. We fit it into our formula. This will surprise no one. I have a spreadsheet open at all times, and I jot things down, and I make formulas and stuff just for various things going on.
Yeah, taking a look at it, basically heuristic. I feel like there's another term, but whatever. If it explains the same thing,
it does.
Yeah.
Well, it got me thinking too. Like, So I'm a mentor for a queer teen outreach here in Louisville, and so we have a downtown. Believe it or not, in Louisville, there's a church that donated space to our queer teen group, and we meet various times during the week to do, different kinds of programming. We have, everything from just like arts and crafts stuff to like job training if people want to do that, or just hangout nights, game nights. Just have a safe place for queer teens to go. And a lot of, I would say, it wouldn't surprise me if over half of the teens that we have, and we probably have anywhere from 20 to 40 that come on a given night of programming, it wouldn't surprise me if half were either disabled in some way or neurodivergent in some way, just in all the different kinds of permutations that comes into. And we have some kids that have, and forgive me if Tourette's is not the accepted word.
I am less familiar with that one in terms of accepted word.
Yes, if it's not, forgive me, and then let me know, and I'll change it. But they verbalize sort of uncontrollably sometimes. And one thing that really struck me about this group, and one of the reasons that I love mentoring as a 39-year-old, is because I'm constantly learning from 13 and 14 and 15-year-olds. But this person, this one of the people that had this situation, it was their first night in programming. They didn't know anybody. They'd never been there before, didn't know a single person. And we go around the room and we say our names and pronouns, and we, question of the day or whatever. And they said, "Hi, my name is such and such. I use these pronouns. By the way, sometimes when I get overstimulated, I bark. And that's just a thing that I do sometimes. And it's fine. And you don't have to worry about it. And it's not anything that you did wrong. It's just something that I do." And everybody nodded. And that person occasionally barked during, that was their kind of verbal tick or whatever. Nobody cared. Nobody laughed. Nobody made fun of them. And we had somebody else on another night that came in and said, I have a Tourette's, and I say, sometimes I occasionally say things that are inappropriate, and it's okay to laugh at me if I do that. I'm laughing too. I don't mean to do that. And the group just completely met everybody where they were at with their thing. And nobody acted scared or suspicious or weirded out or put off by it. That group was just so good. Even the strangers were so good at saying, "Hey, here's my situation. Here's a need that I have. Here's how you can accommodate me." And these are 13 and 14-year-olds. I can't do that now at 39. I'm terrible at asking for accommodations. I have horrible misophonia. I will dissociate the fuck out in like a loud restaurant, and I still don't know how to like tell people, "Hey, by the way, if I completely go into space for 20 minutes, it's fine." But like these kids are so good about just coming in and saying, "Hey, here's my situation. Don't sweat it. Here's what you need to know. If I fall asleep, I'm narcoleptic. Just leave me." It's like, I'm just so impressed by this younger generation and their ability to articulate these things to each other and meet each other where they're at. And I'm like, God damn, I wish I'd had that when I was in school. If and in these classes, I don't know if that would have, I don't know if that same lingo works for some of my experiences with the special needs classes that were meeting with us. But I just think, wow, that's a skill set that I wish everybody was learning, because I'm learning at 39 from these kids,
Well, oh, sorry.
No, just
fizzling
to a stop.
Okay. I was just thinking, like, and context wrench brought up slightly, but like in terms of the expressing needs thing and just the importance of that, and people aren't taught much that other people have different needs than them. There isn't just like a global need that everyone has. It's a little bit more specific to the person, like, and not just specific to the person, but also specific to the circumstance. If someone has a broken arm, their needs are changed, and Although that goes into a much longer conversation, which we don't have time for, because alas, we are getting close. We're slowly reaching close to the end of the show. Mismatch by Cat Holmes. Okay. I suspect Context Wrench will link that in chat. And that might show up. I might
hate
get
it when a
the
conversation I'm really enjoying it keeps coming to an end.
I have a real quick thing to throw out there. Because I stayed in the music business, the people I associate with are younger, and when I came out trans, I thought there was going to be a whole thing, and people just went, oh, okay. And a few people said, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And nobody said anything for a while. And I finally just asked, someone I was close to, I said, yeah, I thought there was going to be some big thing because, of my age, they would be when I was around. He's like, no, it's, it's one of those things that happens. We all know people like you do. I kind of only glancingly knew people. And that's where.
Oh, there we go. Context Wrench linked the book you showed in chat.
And anyway, I wanted to get that out there just because, yeah, it is a strange thing how different generationally it is, and it's a cool thing.
Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting. I am slowly getting better at expressing needs with relation to. Because I'm around your age too. I know my charming appearance, despite being, I think I'm only like 1 year younger than you or something, based on what you said. But yeah, no, it's a work in progress in terms of just expressing needs, because I'm good with my girlfriend, but not necessarily with the average person. I don't know. I'm testing the waters a little bit. I express things sometimes. Sometimes I'll bring out, because like the traumatic brain injury I experienced kind of took away from my emotional control, I think, to some degree. Something about getting hit by a car as a pedestrian and presumably having my face smash into the front of the vehicle was not helpful for my brain. With frontal lobe damage.
That can happen.
It's just a minor thing. But like, yeah, no, it's just that and autism related stuff, which is exacerbated from the traumatic brain injury. It's a lot easier for me to have a meltdown of sorts than it was previous to that. But yeah, I'm usually bad at expressing that because, like, in most circumstances, I can, at minimum, force my way through it, or in the case of this, I do know my limitations better, but, like, I don't know where it's going there. And we're approaching we're closer to the end when it should end now anyways. So you know what, I'll start with you since you're our guest. That Dang Dad, where can people find you? Is there anything you're working on that you want to promote?
Yeah, so That Dang Dad is my YouTube channel, and That Dang Phil is my Twitter handle, and those are the places I hang out. I'm gonna ride Twitter down to the end, baby. I'm riding that into the fires of Mount Doom. But yeah, so my YouTube channel is kind of where I make videos. I do 20 to 30-minute videos about everything from pop culture and music to video games and philosophy, just kind of whatever seems interesting to me. Try to keep it pretty chill, pretty mellow, pretty non-pugilistic, if you will. If you, people seem to enjoy that I'm not not that there's maybe not a place for more bombastic personalities. That's just not me. I try to provide a nice little chill space for people to come hang out and think about interesting things and chat with me. And I'm pretty responsive, and I'm at a level now in my YouTube career where I'm still able to respond to most comments, and I really enjoy hearing from people. So if you want to come check out That Dang Dad on YouTube, I've got a wealth of interesting things, everything from police and prison abolition to Disco Elysium to a music video I did about Elden Ring. So, it's try to keep it pretty variety. And, but yeah, I try to be pretty approachable online. I like to have a good time and here to make friends and, all that good stuff. And I appreciate you having me on. This was a fun and interesting conversation. I really appreciate getting to hang out with you all. This was nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was good meeting you.
Yeah. Well, too.
Perfect. Where can people find you or whatever?
Well,
someone said plug your letterbox. I don't know what that is about.
My letterbox. Oh, I watch lots and lots and lots of movies. And so I have a letterbox where I review and rate those movies. So you can find me, I don't know. What is my letterbox? I don't know. What is my letterboxd? Thrillin' Phil. Thrillin' Phil. Like Thrilling Phil, but with no G. But
okay.
I watch only the finest movies, so you can come see what I like and watch the same movies as me.
I assume that means that half of them are really Drek, but enjoyable.
I love Drek.
Yeah.
Nuts.
Okay. This is my
Perfect. Where
major
can
social
people find
media
you?
outlet. But
oh yeah, sorry. You already went back into
this is my
that.
major social media outlet, and then there's the Discords, the Rumpus Room, and the Fluid Voice Discords. And if you @ me, I will text back. I will show. So that's that.
Christy, what about you?
I'm Christy Abbey. Just the middle initial L with what you see on your screen. On Twitter, I'm still working on the things I've been working on because it's not going to be it's not a short project. It's going to take at least a year, so I'll probably keep saying week after week. I'm still working on the book, so. And yeah, the Twitter thing, I haven't actually gone back. Had the electrical fire, we didn't have electricity for a week. And then I looked at how many notifications I had on Twitter, and that's all I've done. I've sent one 8-word message to Context Wrench.
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh, you love Context Wrench more than anybody else. I see how it is.
Yeah, well, you were friends before this, so.
Anyways, and I'm gonna be on hiatus, so you're really, like, the only place you're gonna see me is either here or I'm testing out Tumblr and Mastodon, and I always had an Instagram, but Instagram is not a good place to find me. Cohost.org. That's another one. I'm on Ozma In The Dark, everywhere except the co-host one. I have dashes in between the in and the dark, and I did that because people, whenever I'm on Twitch and I raid a channel, they always say Ozma because all the letters are stitched together. I'm just like, I got frustrated with that, so I decided to do that for my new account, but only that account, none of the other accounts I did that with. So I don't know, it's just an impulsive thing.
Maybe you should have stuck with being called Pip.
Wait, I was called Pip?
It's what Ozma was called.
Tip.
Tip.
Tipitarius.
Tipitarius.
And also no.
That's like Pip.
You said Pip. That's what threw me off. Yeah, no. Yeah, because Ozma was definitely also possibly unintentional, probably closet trans metaphor for transitioning, because Ozma was born as a boy or was raised as a boy and found out later that she was a princess and turned her true princess form.
We stand our trans queen.
But anyways, yeah, I think I'll probably need to post another reminder. I think we should have Christy again for the last episode, that I'm dealing with the technical stuff, so which will be next week, and then I will be on hiatus. So that said, oh no,
I'm gonna talk to Chrissy in a year now.
What's it? Your voice matters, your life matters, and you matter. Did I get it wrong again? I can't remember the order.
Life, voice, you.
Okay, your life matters, your voice matters. Wait, no, did I do it wrong again?
No, you got it this time.
Okay, and you matter. Have a wonderful Indigenous Genocide Day.
Bye. Live long and prosper.